Hello friends, my name is Post-Production Pi, Editor-in-Chief for srlounge.com. Welcome to another installment of our weekly Ordinary to Extraordinary Raw Edit featuring the SR Lounge Lightroom Preset System V5. Now, as with every video, we're going to be demonstrating first how to create the effect using the preset system, and then we'll be going through the actual developed settings just to help everybody understand what's going into each look and effect. That way, everybody that's watching can benefit from the tutorial as well, whether you have the preset system or not. Now, if you're interested in learning more about the SR Lounge Lightroom Preset System, as always, feel free to click in the description below. The link will take you to the SR Lounge store where you can read and check out all the videos. So, that being said, let's get started. In this video, we're going to be jumping into the vivid stylized presets. We're going to be doing the same thing that we did earlier with the soft stylized presets. And hopefully at this point, you guys understand we've used vivid presets in so many cases on images that have portraits. And really, we're just using the vivid presets when we want to create a more vivid look. It doesn't have to be necessarily a landscape or a portrait. It's just when we want that more high contrast, vivid look to an image. We're using the soft presets. We want the more low contrast look to an image. So just think of them that way as opposed to one having to be only for portraits or one having to be only for landscape type images. Now, let's get started. We're going to go and look first at our image information. This was shot on a 5D Mark II. This was also out in China during that same session. It's actually that same part where we shot this image right here that we produced earlier. So it's the same spot. We're just shooting directly on it right now. We can see kind of these high rises, these apartment buildings in the back, which looks really cool. It's a very kind of big city China type feel in this shot, which I dig. It was taken on a 50mm 1.4. Again, we shot this at f2, which is kind of a nice little sweet spot as far as still getting a lot of bokeh. It's not the sharpness sweet spot, but it still gives you a lot of bokeh, a little bit bigger of depth of field and better sharpness than shooting at 1.4. We shot this at 1/640th of a second at ISO 100. We have quite a bit of our highlights blown here, but you know, it's not too big of a deal because we're going to go with a kind of vintage look for this image anyway. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into our vivid stylized presets. Once again, we're going to work with the standard vivid stylized look. So we're going to be working with the color looks. Let's just jump through and kind of flip through them and see which one we like the best. So I like the punchy fade. I like the dark fade. I actually like all of these. So neutral fade looks nice. Each one of these kind of has its own, you know, appeal to it. So just pick whatever one suits your style and your image best. I'm going to go with either a dark or maybe a neutral. Let's go with maybe a neutral on this one. And let's see, if I brighten it up, do we lose too much of the background over here? I don't want to lose too much of our apartment buildings. So I might go with a dark fade because it might keep those buildings a little better. Yeah, it does. It keeps it a little bit better over here, especially when I brighten up the exposure a little bit. And we get a nice overall fade too. Okay, so we've selected that. Let's follow the BCAS format for developing. We're going to select a curve now. We're actually going to just modify the curve. So we chose a dark wash or a dark fade. So these are using the dark washes, so we can select any of the dark washes and it's only going to modify the color toning. Let's go ahead and go to our dark washes down here. I want to add some greens to this because I really dig it. We're going to show you a couple different looks for this, this type of image. So let's first do a little bit of greens and then let's go and work our way down. Let me see what else I want. I think I want to reduce a tiny bit of the contrast. So let's just go to contrast and let's go to a boost light so we don't have, you know, as much as we did a second ago. We had 50 a second ago, which would have been a medium. I want to back it off just a little bit. All right, I'm going to leave everything else where it's at. We're going to go down to special effects now, and let's choose a nice little effects. And maybe I'll go with an analogous effect for this. That's kind of more colors that are right next to each other on the color wheel. So we're going to go with a green yellow. And what we'll do is just adjust the toning to get it to the point where we want. So we have a little bit too much green right now. We're just going to add a little bit of tint back. And what I want to create is this kind of very neutral look to this image with just this hint of green toning throughout. So I'm adjusting the temperature down to bring out some of the yellows and I'm adjusting the tint up to bring in some of the pinks, and we get this beautiful kind of overall bright vibe. Has a very neutral tone to it, but we can see those hints of green and yellow kind of throughout the image. So I dig it. Let's check out the before on this. And here's the before. I'm hitting backslash. Here's the after. A few clicks and we get to this beautiful kind of filmic look. If we wanted to add a little bit more filmic look, we can add some grain. We could add a little bit more edge effects to it and do whatever. But I'm not going to do that. I want to show you now how easy it is to modify our color scheme. So from here, we're going to hit Control apostrophe or Command apostrophe on a Mac to create a virtual copy. And what we're going to do is just adjust the curve and the special effects. So let's say now we want to go with a more warm tone for this image. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is actually double click click, or we can just go as shot for our temperature. That way we get back to normal temperature so we can see exactly what the adjustments are as we're applying them. We're going to go back to our curves this time, and in the dark washes, I'm going to flip through the amber. Actually, let's go and reset the color real quick first. And then let's go back to our warm curves, and let's go through amber, apricot, crimson, and our warm cross. And I'm actually going to go with that crimson look over here again. I love that look in this scene. Apricot works really nicely as well. Let's stick with apricot. Let's do something a little bit different. So we're going to go with apricot, and then down here once again we can choose a different scheme. So if we want to go with a more warm scheme, we can go with yellow violet, orange blue. All these are going to have more kind of warm looks to them. And then once we start getting into the blues, it's going to start cooling it off and creating kind of more funky effects that I'm not really going for this image. Let's go down to the analogous ones, and let's go and choose again yellow, green, yellow, orange. These are going to be very, very warm. Same thing with orange, yellow. Orange, red is going to be extremely warm as well. And then we start getting to more cool effects as we get to the blues and the greens. We can do tone and tone as well. You want to just kind of flip through and see what it is that you like for that particular image. Now, I already know what I want for this image. I want probably an orange blue or an orange teal, and I dig this vibe already that I have with it. I'm going to warm up the temperature just a little bit so we get a little bit more of the yellows into it. I'm going to just bring down the tint a tiny bit so we get a little bit less pink. And that's great. So with 2 clicks over here, we can choose a different color scheme. And let's compare now. We have 2 completely different looks for this exact same image. Okay, so I'm just hitting C to go into compare, and then we're hitting tab to kind of give us a little extra screen real estate. If you want to see, because they look a little bit blurry right now, so we can go back to our, let's actually go back to the develop module view. And all I'm going to do is just move between. So let's deselect and just move between these different looks. So again, we can create a lot of different looks. We can go and modify curves. We can create different contrast curves or choose different contrast curves along with different colors to add to our image. We have essentially 3 layers of color with first our curve, we have our color scheme, and then we have our temperature. So think of color in that way. You can layer by 3 different layers by adjusting these 3 different things. And generally I'm leaving temperature tint for last. I'm usually choosing something that's kind of close to where the image should be, making my color adjustments with my curve, then my color schemes, and then my final adjustments with the temperature last. All right, so that's it for this. If you want to save these out as mixologies, we can. I'm actually going to save this one out, and we're going to call this, let's see. I already have that dark yellow violet fade, so I'm just going to save this one out, and I'm going to call this 05. Let's actually check all the right options first. White balance, exposure, uncheck lens corrections. I'm doing this really not so you guys save every one of these things, but just so you remember which items to select when you're creating your new mixologies. Okay, and then calibration we're going to turn off as well. I'm going to call this 05, and let's do kind of this teal. Let's see, what is it? It's really more of a teal. I'm just going to call it a teal vintage fade. Yeah, well, we'll say teal green. Okay, my mixology pie, you can name it whatever you want, guys. Anything you like, whatever your heart's content. Okay, this other preset is kind of similar to the last one we created. When we created this one over here, it's very similar to that one. So I'm not going to save that out as a new preset because we already kind of have it. All right, so that's it. We can create tons of different looks and color schemes, whatever really fits the image and the vision that we have for the emotion and kind of what we want to pull off in that image, we can do with just modifying the curve and then our special effects color scheme. Real quick, just to go over our settings, you've already seen the basic panel settings. So for this image here, what's happening is we have this dark wash that's being applied. If we go and flip through the RGB, we can see a slight adjustment down in our red base and then a boost in the highlights. In the greens, we're seeing a little bit of a boost overall. In the blues, we're seeing a little bit of boost in the base and then a little bit more, well, a little bit of a boost in the highlights, but less so than in the base. This gives us kind of that teal overall look to the tone curve itself. We're also adding split toning here. This is the, I think this was the green on yellow, or yeah, green on yellow. So we have green highlight, we have orange in the shadows. So we have an analogous color scheme with the balance set appropriately. Everything else is really standard. We have the same amount of sharpening, the same amount of lens vignetting as we did before. Whether you want to apply grain or not is really up to you. But that's it for that. Let's go over to this one. We have the same exact settings for our basic adjustments and everything else, but this time you just see that the curve is completely different. So if we go to RGB, once again we're using a dark wash here, but if I flip to my reds, we have a heavier boost in the red channel. which is giving us that higher level of warmth and the kind of that red tone. We have the same amount, or basically we have greens is pretty much standard, and with blues we have a drop, and so this reveals more of the greens and more of the reds, which we've boosted, which again gives us that warm tone to the image. So I think this was the apricot dark wash that we selected, and that's why you have that kind of warm red tone to it. All right, going down, we have split toning here. We chose, I believe, the yellow blue, or it might have been yellow violet. I think it was yellow blue. Yeah, so we have yellow blue, yellow in the highlights. We have blue over in the shadows. Again, a balance of 30. And then again, all the detail and everything else in the image was the same. All right, so that's it for this tutorial. Hope you all enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next video.